and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Hello, everybody. It's time for Gay USA again. I'm Ann Northrup.
And I'm Erin Johns. Hi, I'm back.
Thank heavens, because Andy is not here, and it would be very lonely if there were just an empty box next to me here at the start of the program. So we have a quite fascinating program, I think, for you today. Let us go through the headlines, which begin inevitably with Republican Representative-elect George Santos of New York as he tries to explain his resume lies and looks forward to taking his seat in Congress despite defrauding his constituents.
Hopping over to Germany, we have the Catholic bishops coming good on their promise that they won't be firing LGBTQ employees.
Lovely. Let's see what the Vatican has to say about that. And back to New York, Governor Kathy Hochul is defying the pleas of progressives. She has nominated a conservative as the state's chief judge. That is not going to, happen easily.
And in Hollywoodland, one of our favorites, Sharon Stone, has explained her decades of support for people living with HIV, and she's revealed how it damaged her career.
Yeah, I have a lot of admiration for her doing that. And also for Christian singer Amy Grant, who you are seeing this week, may have already be a Kennedy Center honoree. She announced that she is going to host her lesbian niece's wedding at her Tennessee farm.
See, you can do it. You can be a Christian and really mean it. And speaking of fabulous Christians, we have Andy popping in from London to review several plays now that are now on there. I have so much envy for you, Andy. I can't wait to hear you talk about the fabulous play that details the experience between Gore Vidal and William F. Buckley Jr. So I'm waiting with bated breath for your reviews later in the show.
Yes, and we'll see how he feels about your describing him as a Christian. I'm not sure.
Let's talk about that. I have to share my theories.
Yeah. Well, so do I, but we'll skip that at the moment and save them for the end of the show when Andy will indeed show up. I do want to, I have a couple of corrections this week. I'm going to start with one at the top of the show. Last week, in talking about Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum announcing her retirement from Congregation Beth Simchat Torah, I referred to her partner, Randy Weingarten, as the woman called the most dangerous person in America by, I said, Ted Cruz. That, of course, was absolutely wrong. It was Mike Pompeo who called her the most dangerous woman in America. So my apologies to Randy. I suppose I should be apologizing to Ted Cruz, but that day will never come. But the person sort of apologizing this week, of course, is George Santos, newly elected to Congress from Long Island and Queens, New York. You've been hearing about him in the news for the last week or so because the New York Times did a little expose, a large expose on him, revealing all the lies on his resume. And he, after his lawyer came out and said, "How dare you say those defamatory things about him," not denying that they were real, just claiming that they were nasty, George Santos, as promised yesterday, spoke up about everything that he's been charged with. So, Maren, do you want to run down any of the...
I had some thoughts. I mean, I think we were all shocked about the claim to have Holocaust survivor relatives. And then we found out about the wife that he had squirreled away. That was a short-lived marriage. And and then divorced. And this wasn't something that he claimed in his biography, because the only parts of his biography that he wants to claim really do represent, I would say, special interest groups in the phrase of Republicans. So, animal activists, gay people, Jewish people, immigrants, he's got it all laid out there in the biography, but not that he tried to be at some point heterosexual. So this was all just, it's like the hits keep coming. And I did watch his interview with blogger, fake journalist Sky Ostriker from that show she does. And some of the things that came out in the interview were incredible. I was noticed just by the scenics, the optics of it. He's sitting in front of this polished wood cabinet showing fancy stemware for wine glasses, and basically talking about how bourgeois, bougie the New York Times is, and how an elitist publication it is. And I just felt that there was so much wrong with that interview. He said things like, I exaggerated my resume a little bit. I never told any outright lies about my work experience. It was just a poor use of words. When he referred to his wife, he said, we were pretty much in love, but, then I set her free. Things like this that kind of, to me, just confirmed his tendency towards dishonesty. But what do you think?
I think he's still lying about a lot of stuff. And yes, he says he embellished his resume, not that he lied. I want to go through some of the details of that. By the way, he's living at his sister's house. So I think that...
I'm sorry, sister, for insulting your stemware. I too love great stemware, but I think it was really poor choice for him to sit in front of it and then accuse our Journal of Record of being, bourgeois.
Well, I think it has occurred to me that if he has broken any law, it may be, ironically, for a Republican in these days of election denial, he committed fraud as a voter. He is registered at a different address. And did he vote from that address in that district when the election took place? Was he living at his sister's house some miles away? I think voter fraud ought to be something that people look into to charge him with. But let's, I like to go chronologically with this. So let's start with his education. He lied about going to Baruch College in NYU, and he admits that readily. I have never graduated from any institution of higher learning. He doesn't say why he lied about it, and no one, frankly, and he did about half a dozen interviews this week, no one has asked him that directly. But he does talk, as you said, about the New York Times and is very resentful of them and claims that they're very elitist and that he had to embellish his resume because they were treating him like dirt. So he had to make up all these credentials so that he would appear valid in the eyes of voters because the New York Times was trying to tear him down. Now, that is a hell of a defense when you are lying to the voters. Did he work for Goldman Sachs and Citigroup? No. He worked for some little firm that he says was called Linkbridge, that was linking investors to these financial institutions. And so he was adjacent to the financial institutions. And that is what he calls embellishing his resume. Now,
admitting while we're on the topic of employment, it's very interesting to see the mythologizing that Republicans often use in their resume, because he said he omitted his actual genuine work as a customer service agent that he had for 7 months for $12 an hour. Who knows what he was getting paid? But he said he deliberately left it out of his resume because he felt that he would be judged by that. And I think that's a kind of a dog whistle to all of the working class. Look, the bad
yes,
times call that an odd job. Yes.
He was a scammy call operator. And that's what he's calling, working for financial institutions. But then you get from that to his money. And when he first ran for Congress 2 years ago, he said he had like $50,000 in assets, and that was it. No other money, no other income, no nothing. And now he has loaned, 2 years later, he's loaning $700,000 to his campaign and claiming to have $1 million in the bank. And the question is where all that came from, which he has not explained, even in an attempt to embellish anything. And the rumors were that he was connected somehow to a Russian oligarch who was giving him that money. No details confirmed on that, but that was the rumor. And the thing about the marriage is, he was saying he married, he's 34 years old. He married in his early 20s. He didn't divorce for 10 years. But he claims he has a husband of 10 years. So do the math. He said, well, it begs for that statement. He says,
incredible.
He took a long time to get divorced, but he knew early on, that the wife and he were not doing it. And as you said, he freed her and he freed himself. And now he's got this husband, except there's no record of a marriage to whoever this guy is, who we don't know either.
Going back to the money, and I do get a bit cranky at this because it is very hard. He mentioned this phrase, wealth building. He spent his career wealth building. And when you've been a customer service officer on, $12 an hour, show me how you do that. Why do politicians always, it's like the carrot, the golden carrot, waving it in front of the electorate. Just let me show you how I can also make you rich. It is so hard to build wealth in this country. And yet we do have, we have the Trumps who come along and they've all got gold toilet seats and gold plumbing. Thank you very much. But how did they get there? And you tell me.
The Trump tax returns are coming out any minute as we tape this show. So he worked for Linkbridge, which is a little nothing firm. Excuse me, George. And then he worked for some other Ponzi scheme firm that went out of business. And he says after that collapsed, he had so many great contacts from all that work that he was able to go off and accumulate all this wealth. But when you run for Congress, you're supposed to file a financial disclosure form, and you're supposed to declare anyone you got more than $5,000 from. Well, he claims he's made millions.
Yeah.
And yet his financial disclosure form says nothing about any of it. So it's all just nonsense.
Well, this is something, Anthony Weiner, did you hear Anthony Weiner's comments for 77 WABC News? He's weighed in on this, which I think is, highly ironic, but we might as well hear what he had to say.
He did an interview. He interviewed with Katsamatidis, who's another crook.
Exactly. And then there was some analysis, but he did say that he thought Santos was not out of the woods yet, and that what would get him caught up was the financials for exactly the reason that you have said. And his pet theory, though, Weiner's pet theory, is that Santos told such bald-faced lies because he actually didn't think he would get elected. But I'm not sure about that.
Well, he could also have been looking at the example of Trump and others. Jim Jordan is in Congress repeatedly after covering up sexual assaults of wrestlers at a college. They get away with anything. So why should he think that he couldn't get away with it? I remember years ago, I was threatening to run for office as a conservative, just lying about all my political points of view so I could get elected and then flip once I got the power. It ended up not seeming like a good idea. A couple other things. There is the whole thing about his religion, and having said he was, or implied that he was Jewish, and now say, no, I've always been Catholic, but there's some Jewish background in my family. So I refer to myself as Jew-ish.
Yeah.
Ish. And the other thing is, which I thought was very revelatory in the Times today, they had written about him being charged with fraud in Brazil, where his family is from. I think he's gone back and forth between here and there. And he denied it completely. No, I'm not a criminal. I've never done anything wrong. Well, the Times has records of him being charged with fraud from trying to pass stolen checks in Brazil. And the only reason the case hasn't been resolved and he hasn't been convicted is because he skipped town and they haven't pinned him down yet. Now they know where he is now, but
and there was some skipping of rent too. I seem to remember reading he skipped out on his rent somewhere.
Yes, and yes. And as I say, is now living with his sister. Let me just look at my list here and see if there's anything else. Oh, here's really the most disgusting. He said that some firm he had, 4 of its employees were killed in the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando in 2016. They were not. He had no employees who were killed in the Pulse massacre. He now says, well, they were about to come work for me. They were about to come work for me. Is there no...
It's shameless.
Absolutely shameless and really, really disgusting. You know,
I sort of with the animal rights rescue, because he knows that is such a. You remember when Christine Quinn, her campaign for mayor of New York, was really badly damaged because she wouldn't shut down the puppy mills and pet stores in New York.
Or the horse carriages.
Oh, the horse carriages, all of it. But her record on animal rights wasn't seen as active enough and progressive enough. And I think people like Santos, they just take note of all of these potential weak spots for themselves, so they come up with a story. But there was no charity for animal rescue.
Well, he now says there were a bunch of them working together to help animals, and he was cleaning up the poop. That was his job.
Wow.
If only
the colorful distractions, I have to say. I think a psychologist needs to sit down and look at all of this footage, because there's so many tells that you can. I would diagnose myself, just hypothetically, borderline personality issues here, because you can lie and believe. You can believe your lies. And you can, Anthony Weiner said he thought Santos was just doing what he needed to get ahead. And this is in many ways the American message, just fake it till you make it. And then do all the hard work, which he says over and over again. Just trust me. I'm going to get your trust back, and I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to work 20 hours a day.
I'm going to clean up the utility mess on Long Island. I'm going to end crime by working with Mayor Eric Adams to put undercover cops back on the streets. This is all nonsense. And but what I did take from watching the entire 25 minutes of that interview was that he's quite a charmer. He's a young guy who is superficially charming, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with his getting elected, that and spouting all the MAGA, slogans in his campaign, because he is a heavy purported Trump supporter. Trump has had nothing to say about him, by the way. All right. We have now spent a quarter of this program on that, I think.
Well, he's fascinating. It's like the talented Mr. Ripley, indeed. So I know there'll be a new episode next week.
There probably will. And the real question is, there's no reason he won't be sworn in. And will the Republican-led, I think the ethics committee is actually divided evenly. But will they go after him, and will they be able to pin anything on him? And will the Republican House of Representatives be willing to expel him? I suspect no. But we'll see. We'll see, the favorite phrase in American journalism. All right, let's go on to other things. Well, a far more honorable person turned up in Michigan. We've been following the story of the library in Patmos, Michigan, where the voters in several votes have defunded the library because of all the talk about the right-wing crazies about groomers and pedophiles because of library books. So one librarian got very, very fed up with all of this, because the library is closing because they don't have enough money. They raised some money to extend their existence for a while, but they're out of money and they're going out of business. And it's all because of this horrible, horrible lying and cheating and whatever. So one librarian showed up at a community meeting of the library committee and expressed herself to those present.
Last week, when Congress voted on...
No.
Why did we close last week? Well, I'll tell you, we have a breaking point. We have been threatened, we have been cursed. I come to work every day, and let me tell you, I'm working twice as many hours because we can't hire anybody because of the choices that you made. I come in here, I greet everyone with a smile on my face. How are you? Hope you had a good day. Every day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week I've been working. There are signs. I can't bring my grandchildren to this town. They know I'm a librarian. They can read. I'm a pedophile. How dare you people? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. You have said I have sexualized your children. I'm grooming your children. I have 6 grandkids out there. I choose what they read when they come here with me. I chose what my children read. But we broke last week. We were threatened again. I have been cursed on the phone. I have been threatened on the phone. I've had to put the phone on nights for what goes on. I've had people come in here with camera. People come in with stuff on their phone saying I checked out books to an 11-year-old. An 11-year-old does not belong in here without parents. Read what your kid's taking. But we broke. Deal with it. We're human. And I'm tired. And I'm tired of all of you. I moved to this town 2.5 years ago, and I regret it every day for the last year. This has been horrible. I didn't know people could be like this. I wasn't raised this way. I believe in God. I'm Catholic. I'm Christian. I'm everything you are. But I was taught to love your neighbor as you love yourself, no matter what they're like. That God loves all of us. That's not what I hear every day. Not from you, not from the people that come in here anymore. But please understand, we are human and we broke. It was one threat too many, one accusation too many. And all we do is come in here and serve you day after day after day. You're welcome.
Wow, that poor woman.
Exactly. And thank heavens for her speaking up. But that's what's going on around America now.
In this particular library, can I just add that the library officials there in Patmos says that about 90 books have LGBTQ themes out of 67,000 books, which is, I think, 0.12%. It's not even a percent. It's barely 0.1%.
Well,
and that's what this is all over.
LGBTQ does not equal pedophile or groomer. So I don't care how many books they have there. I don't care if they're all LGBTQ. They are not grooming and pedophiling, if I make up a word. I've been recommending to you and will continue to recommend to you the show We're Here on HBO of the 3 drag performers who go around the country to small towns. And the first town they went to this year was Granbury, Texas, where they were greeted with a great deal of hate. Well, Granbury is now under investigation by the U.S. Department of Education for illegal discrimination after the superintendent of schools there was heard on audio tape ordering the removal of LGBTQ books from the school library, just arbitrarily on his own say-so, removing the book. So I'm glad the government's getting involved, but I wish they would move bigger and faster to go after this kind of behavior. All right. Well, a good news moment. We've been showing you, I think, Andrew Hartzler, the nephew of the hideous Vicky Hartzler, representative from Missouri. She was the one weeping on the floor of Congress when the Respect for Marriage Act was passed. Well, after he did his little social media thing about her and how hideous she was, he got invited to the White House for the signing of the Respect for Marriage Act, and he did a little video about that.
Last week, when Congress voted on the Respect for Marriage Act, my Aunt Vicky, seen here, started crying because she didn't want gay people like me to be able to get married. So I made a TikTok and it kind of bopped, and then I got invited to the White House to watch President Biden sign the bill into law. Aunt Vicky who? Vicky who? Aunt Vicky who? Moral of the story, never be afraid to stand up for yourself no matter who it's against. Period.
Excellent words to live by. Thank you.
I'm going to be using that. Aunt Vicky who? I'm going to use that from now on. Anybody I disapprove of.
Please do. In other political news back here in New York, we're all mad at Governor Kathy Hochul at the moment because there is an opening for Chief Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, the highest position judicially in New York State. There were 7 candidates she could choose among to appoint someone, 3 progressives, 3 conservatives, and 1 sort of in the middle, more conservative. She picked a conservative. She's an elected Democratic governor of the state. So she picked Hector LaSalle. And he is a guy, she picked him because he would be the first Latino chief judge. And that's a big deal here. But he is someone whose decisions have been anti-abortion, anti-union, anti-sympathy for any criminal defendants. He says those decisions were based on technicalities. Nonetheless, no one agrees with that. And now there is a huge fight. He's also an ex-prosecutor, and we'd prefer a defendant's lawyer. Huge fight in the state Senate about whether they're going to confirm this guy. And it's very up in the air at the moment. But
and do you know what role the unions could play in this? Because he's also opposed to union progress. What do you think how might that shake out for New York?
The unions are very active against this nomination, and many of them. And at the moment, it's all up to the state Senate, where the Democrats have a huge majority. But a lot of them have come out officially against him so far. And if enough of them back away, Hochul may have to enlist Republicans to support this choice. And that's only going to further enrage Democrats in the state Senate. And it's going to make New York a complete mess, which it is already.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to some... the New York City Police has arrested one guy, a member of a gang that's been drugging and robbing and killing guys coming out of bars. We think this may include the guys who've been coming out of gay bars and been drugged and killed and robbed. We're not entirely sure of that. They say there are 5 people in this gang. They've got more to arrest. We will stay on top of that. But one arrest and identifying the other 4 is good news. Strange news out of San Antonio, Texas, where a trans woman, Joan Simoncelli, is supposed to be on trial for attacking her nephew. He attacked her. And she is trans, intersex, and two-spirit. Her trial has been postponed to January. The cop arrested her, even though the nephew attacked her, because she was wearing a dress and accused her of making a false report of being attacked and threw her into a men's jail. Everything is not up to date in San Antonio.
No, that's for sure.
And we told you last week, we interviewed Eric Botcher, city councilman, about his fight with the Guardians of Divinity, initials GOD, who are right-wing crazies here in the city, who are going after the drag story hours. These people are scheduled to go after another one this week in Queens on Thursday. If you're hearing this before then, there's going to be a right wing versus left wing, or attackers versus defenders at the Jackson Heights Library in Queens this Thursday, the 29th, from 4 to 5 p.m. Not happy that these things are turning more violent and more confrontational.
I mean, what if we end up in a country where it's literally illegal to perform drag shows anywhere, like the bill that was introduced in November in Texas that basically says venues are going to be criminalized if they host any kind of drag event at all.
And I think
that,
similar law proposed in Tennessee. It's insane. It is insane that they're doing this. We got to shut them down, or we're all going to be leaving the country any minute now.
Yeah.
Good news from Colorado, where a court upheld a state law that bars conversion therapy by licensed professionals. The religious people are still allowed to do it under the guise of religious freedom, but the Colorado court upheld the state law and dismissed arguments against it. And a court in Illinois rejected an attempt by Blue Cross Blue Shield to exclude coverage of gender-affirming care in employer contracts. The court said it violates the non-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Care Act. But Blue Cross Blue Shield was trying to say, we don't want to cover this kind of care. And the court said, no, you cannot get away with that. And I want to talk about a couple of people that we lost this week. First, Henry Berg-Brousseau, 24 years old, worked for the Human Rights Campaign. He died by suicide. His mother, who is a doctor and a state senator in Kentucky, says that he just was under too much pressure and he was very depressed. He was the deputy press secretary for politics at the Human Rights Campaign, a huge blow and a huge loss for them.
I think definitely the level of toxicity that he would have been working with, not for the HRC, but being at the coalface of communications there, and the amount of reading that he would have had to do, and the amount of exposure to the hateful rhetoric. I can say, as a news journalist myself, for my other job in straight breaking news, it affects you over time. It really does affect you constantly. The attrition on what we are prepared to do to each other. And then for Henry to have to go home and reflect on this every night, whatever else was going on in his own personal life. Yeah, it's very sad to me that he couldn't get the help he needed.
And he was certainly well placed to get that help, but he had been an activist since his high school days. He testified at 16 to the Kentucky legislature against an anti-trans bill, which they passed anyway. And he had stood there with the legislature and said, look, you may not think you know anyone trans. Well, now you do, because here I am, 16 to the legislature. So I think he had been intensely involved in this work for a third of his life, at least. And it just was an enormous amount of pressure, and in a world that is getting worse, not better. He said, they tell us it gets better, but it's not getting better.
I agree with that. Can I please take 1 second to give a shout out to the Trevor Project here and all the work they do for us. If you are an older person and a young LGBTQ person who is struggling or having suicidal thoughts, please refer them to the 24-hour hotline, the crisis line for youth. It is 1-866-488-7386.
Trevor Project, very valuable work and just desperately needed in these times when we are under such overt assault. There is they're not doing it behind closed doors these days. They are coming right out into our faces and attacking. It's incredible to me how shameless they are and how vicious and cruel. And yes, the Trevor Project is a great resource. Now, on a less violent note, but another great loss this week. Kathy Whitworth she won more golf tournaments as a professional than any woman, any man. She won more golf tournaments than Tiger Woods, than Jack Nicklaus, than Arnold Palmer, than Sam Snead. She beat them all. And she was renowned as someone who was just a relentless winner. people said that she was a complete sweetheart to play with, a totally nice person who was just wonderful to you, but that she beat herself up relentlessly if she was not winning, that she was a dedicated winner. Now, one of her, there she is in her heyday, looking just stunning. We, of course, are mentioning her because she was a lesbian, because she is survived by her partner of many years, Betty Odell, and they lived in Texas. That's where she was born. That's where she died. Died at a Christmas party on Christmas Eve with family and friends, just collapsed suddenly, unexpectedly, age 83, and died. Well, her chief rival was Mickey Wright, who was known as maybe the best golfer. Kathy Whitworth was the winningest golfer, but Mickey Wright was the most elegant and really most skilled golfer. And they used to say she was better than Jack Nicklaus, better than any golfer you care to name. Mickey Wright also had a female partner of many years. So someone asked me as we were discussing Kathy Whitworth yesterday, were people out? Are they out? What's the story with these professional golfers? And the answer is that it has evolved over time, but the Ladies Professional Golf Association was a very small club to begin with. And clearly, a lot of them were lesbians, including Babe Diedrichson Zaharias. And they were the stars. And of course, we think all, great female athletes are lesbians, but we can't prove that. And it's less and less true, I guess. But it's interesting to watch the evolution of who, how much they could talk about it. These women certainly were known by all their family and friends to have these partners, longtime partners in their lives, but it was never, ever talked about publicly until they died. And then it was talked about because it's these days and people are more open about talking about it. Now, some women have come out along the way, but now you have Mel Reid, an English golfer, whose wedding to her female partner was celebrated by broadcasters a year or two ago and spoken about quite casually. But I have, I think, told the story and will repeat it of Judy Rankin, the premier golf commentator and Hall of Fame player, who in 2004, when golfer Rosie Jones came out publicly, a rare thing to do at the time, criticized her on the air and said, "We don't need to know about Rosie Jones' private life." Really, Judy? Really? You talk about everyone else's. You talk about your husband all the time. You talk about everyone else's kids and husbands and everything. But you feel you can go on national television and criticize Rosie Jones for coming out. I think you have some nerve. But she's the great heroine of golf commentating. Everybody loves Judy. Watch out if I ever run into you, Judy, because you're going to get a little talking to.
And what is it about lesbians in golf? Is it the plaid? I mean, I just don't get it.
It's a fabulous sport. It's a fabulous, fabulous sport. And I don't tell people to take it up because I don't want them crowding my golf courses if they're not good. But it's a treat. It is a joy. It is a gift.
It is a walk in the park with a purpose and a clubhouse at the end of it.
Well, it's a lot of things, but we don't have time for me to justify golf. Instead, we'll move on appropriately to international news.
Yes.
Unless you have anything else national.
No. I'm fascinated by Switzerland and their obsession with the gender binary.
Go ahead.
Well, they're saying that they're not going to be considering a gender-free, no gender, third gender legislation option for official records. There's been a couple of proposals brought to Swiss Parliament, and it has been said that, quote, the binary gender model is still strongly anchored in Swiss society. So they consider there's really no need to review that.
Well, it did take them a long time to let women vote. But yeah, they say it's not time yet. It's too complicated. Luckily, Spain and what's the other one? And Scotland think differently. And the parliament in Spain has passed a bill that will allow trans kids to change their gender marker if they're over 16, strictly on their own. They can make their own decision. If they're younger than 16, they may need the approval of a doctor or a judge or a parent or guardian. But Spain is very progressive about this. And Scotland passed a similar law for trans self-determination. But the British government is not crazy about this and it wants to block it. So mixed results.
We've got that conservative chap is now the prime minister, so you can expect a roadblock for most things.
Exactly. And Ukraine, in spite of being in the midst of the war we hear about endlessly and horribly, has found time for its legislature to outlaw hate speech on sexual orientation and gender identity. So you can walk and chew gum at the same time, and thank you to them for that. But in Nigeria, once again, the authorities have raided what they're calling a same-sex wedding and arrested 19 people, 15 of whom are women and 4 men. So I'm wondering whether that was a lesbian wedding, but it wasn't designated in the news story I read.
Yeah, I think it was organized by the females, and everybody there seemed to be young and in their 20s. So
makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. And the European Commission is withholding 22 billion euros from Hungary, as they've been kind of threatening to do. The money is meant to sort of stabilize their standard of living versus Europe. But they say until you get your act together on to ensure the independence of your judiciary, academic freedoms, LGBTQ rights, and the right to asylum, you're not getting the money. And Germany, the Conference of Catholic Bishops is following through on its promise. They have officially decided not to fire married LGBTQ employees. Now, this, of course, runs counter to everything that's happening, for instance, in this country and around the world. It is fantastic that the German bishops have decided not to fire married same-sex couples.
Right, and the German Catholic Church actually employs nearly 1 million people in Germany, and this law is also applying to remarrying after a divorce, which affects many, many more people. It affects gay people too.
Now, when I read this story, I was first thinking, how many of those 800,000 employees are gay? And then I thought, lots of them.
Yeah.
We know that Russia has recently expanded its anti-LGBTQ laws to forbid any mention or manifestation of gay stuff. Well, their internet regulator, their official government agency, is now announcing it will block all websites that have any mention of LGBTQ people, issues, whatever.
But it's okay if Russian troops can keep raping people. That's okay.
Yeah, they're fine with that. We've been worried about the new coalition government in Israel and Netanyahu having to make deals with even more right-wing people. Well, now the right-wing members of his coalition are threatening to pass laws for religious exemptions, as we have in this country, for doctors treating LGBTQ patients. Look forward to that. And in Indonesia, 2 soldiers have been arrested for gay sex. They have been discharged from the armed forces and put in jail for 7 months.
Well, listen, I have to say they got off lightly, because the way that the country is moving more towards Sharia law, I would say I would be very frightened for them.
Exactly. It could be worse. All right, let's a couple of notes here before we get to entertainment news and our surprise guest. In AIDS news, Argentina has passed a new law promoted by activists to improve access to treatments for people living with HIV, improving their quality of care, saying that to do so is in the public interest. Patents are being released so drugs can be free access to health care, non-discrimination, better rights. Also, PWAs are regarded as people who age quicker, so they're allowed to retire at 50. Interesting. No criminalization, no secret testing, and this also applies to people with tuberculosis and sexually transmitted infections. And in Saudi Arabia, which I thought we were not visiting these days, but they held a Red Sea Film Festival, and Sharon Stone was there and was interviewed and says that when she agreed to step in once for Elizabeth Taylor at an AMFAR event, American Foundation for AIDS Research, she expected it to be a one-time thing, but she ended up working for them for 20 years. And she says her career was devastated, that she couldn't get a job for 8 years. And she faced resistance, cruelty, hate, oppression, and death threats. And people were telling her to stop saying condom or they would fire her. But she's thrilled that she was part of 37 million people now living healthy lives with better drugs.
And she raised millions and millions of dollars, 35 million, I think. I mean, good for her. She's one of the wonderful Hollywood people.
She is. She's done a lot and had some hard times. So I think it is now time to bring in our surprise guest from London. Who could it be? Oh, there's a.
Oh, yeah. And Marin, I was raised a Christian, but
you're my kind of Christian, though. You see,
a Catholic to be precise, but we got a divorce.
Oh.
And the ethics committee, Anne, is evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats and never gets anything done.
See, I don't have to give that correction next week because I figured it out along the way.
And of course, George Santos is a sociopath, and sociopaths are charming, and that's how they get over on everybody.
Yes, for a while they absolutely do. So, Andy, there you are in London. Imagine that.
Well, I did leave the country. You're talking about us all leaving the country. Yeah. Look, I'm over here.
Feel free to stay away. We understand, but it's up to you.
So I'm over here seeing some shows, not as many as I usually do. But my advice to viewers who write me and say, I'm going to London, what should I do? You go to certain places, and especially the National Theatre, which has been around for more than 50 years there. I saw 3 shows there. At their Littleton Theatre, there's an outstanding and very muscular telling of Othello, starring Giles Terrera as the Moor of Venice and Rosie McEwen as Desdemona. And you might remember Paul Hilton, who was E.M. Forster in The Inheritance as the wicked Iago. And the racism, even in the open city of Venice, is palpable in this production. And Othello gets ground up in it. But it's almost 3 hours of great Shakespeare and a real gift. At the small Dorfman Theatre at the National, playwright April DeAngelis, who did such a great job dramatizing My Brilliant Friend on stage, took a chance on a small story about Kerry Jackson, a conservative entrepreneur trying to make a go of a tapas restaurant in a liberal London neighborhood and clashing with the locals. Now, this play got kind of thumped on by most of the critics, but the audience that I was with enjoyed Fay Ripley's performance there. And at least it doesn't patronize liberal sensibilities. And the artistic director of the National is a guy named Rufus Norris, and he has put together, they do these things at holiday time, fairy tales, and he picked Sleeping Beauty, and it's called X. And actually, it's a dark and wild musical version of Sleeping Beauty, full of fairies and child-eating ogres, male and female. And the show fills the stage of the Big Olivier Theatre with humor, wonder, rock music, and a troubling tale. We're a long way from the Disney version, but it's worth a visit. And finally, the one that's most likely to come to the United States, I think it will, Best of Enemies at the Noel Coward Theatre by James Graham, who writes these very absorbing political plays. dramatizes the 1968 political convention debates, commentaries on TV by conservative William F. Buckley Jr. and liberal Gore Vidal on ABC's coverage in Miami and Chicago. Now, much is made that as high-minded as these clashes were supposed to be, they descended into name-calling. Gore calling Bill a crypto-Nazi and Bill calling Gore a queer on live TV in 1968. The point being that things haven't changed that much. Now, it's gotten great reviews, and I was a little put off, however, by some of the actors not really being able to capture the personalities of the principals as I remember them, because I knew all these people, or I didn't know them personally, but we grew up with them, right, Ann?
I remember that. I remember those debates.
Absolutely, and there's a documentary about it, and but and so they've cast David Harewood as Buckley, a black man, but he showed, which is fine, but he showed little of Buckley's studied eccentricity and, quite frankly, fruitiness that Buckley had. And Zachary Quinto was better as Vidal, but you won't come away appreciating how maniacal he could be. And the other characters are James Baldwin, Walter Cronkite, Huntley, and Brinkley. And while I wasn't expecting impersonations, I was hoping they would convey some of the singularity of these figures. And if I'm skipping it, but Ian McKellen is doing Dressing Up as Mother Goose, if you'd like to see something like that.
I saw a picture of it. I could imagine maybe Nathan Lane taking one of those roles and conveying the real nastiness and intelligence, but those two actors just don't seem to me to be old enough or seasoned enough to play those parts. Correct.
Well, maybe they'll cast it differently in New York.
Well, I hope so.
Well, nice to be with you.
Nice to have you here. Do you want to stick around for?
Sure, I'll stay, but I'll listen more. I've watched the whole show. It's a great show. Nice to see you, Maren.
Oh, nice to see you. Yeah. I would love to hear a new segment from London, what's happening there, because we all know that there's so much happening for LGBTQ people and rights, and it's kind of like the coalface of the turf wars, TERF. So, yeah, another time perhaps.
Here's your aside. Either come back next week and do that, or when you're back here in 2 weeks co-hosting with Maren, you can
yes,
it'll have to be 2 weeks. I'm going off to the Finborough Theater that night, and I'm going to the Almeida to see Streetcar Named Desire. So I'll have more reviews for you, Maren.
Oh, how exciting. I cannot wait to hear about those shows.
Okay. Meanwhile, this week here, the Kennedy Center honors are being broadcast probably before you see this, but one of the honorees is Amy Grant, who is a longtime Christian singer and is the first. There she is with her husband Vince Gill, also a fantastic singer, and they are extremely progressive, and they have a farm outside Nashville in Tennessee, and they've been longtime LGBTQ supporters. And Amy announced that they will be hosting her niece's lesbian wedding at the farm, and she says when her niece came out to her, her reaction was, what a gift to our whole family, to just widen the experience of our whole family. I think they're lovely people. Brandi Carlile is involved in the honoring of her at the Kennedy Center, out lesbian singer. So it's all very gay at the Kennedy Center honors. And thank you to Amy for that. We do have a few minutes. All right. And tell the Poland story.
Oh, yes. Speaking of entertainers who do the right thing, goddammit, Mel C, aka Sporty Spice of the former girl group, the Spice Girls, has cancelled her appearance at a New Year's Eve party in Poland because she obviously heard on the gay grapevine that there was some, political right-wingers leading the country astray. She tweeted, in light of some issues that have been brought to my attention that do not align with the communities I support, I'm afraid I will no longer be able to perform in Poland as planned on New Year's Eve. And I think she knows which side of the bread her bread is buttered on, and it's the gay side.
Well, I'm disappointed to figure out that she's not been watching Gay USA, because we've been talking about Poland for 10, 15 years at least.
We love Sporty Spice.
Well, she's chosen the newsworthy moment to do this. The Library of Congress each year adds films to its National Film Registry as sort of national treasures, and has added several LGBTQ films this year for their cultural, historic, and aesthetic importance. At least 10 of the new films have some the films have to be at least 10 years old, but they've added this year Hairspray, Pariah, which is a really small independent film whose director Dee Reese has gone on to great things, but who was on Gay USA when Pariah was first issued. Tongues Untied, the great Marlon Riggs film that was censored on PBS, supposed to air on POV. And Word Is Out. Word Is Out has finally made it to the Library of Congress. So these are all very worthy films, and I'm glad they're adding them. Marin, you have a short film you want to tout that's been shortlisted for the Oscars.
Absolutely. When the Oscar nominations came out, the eligibility list last week, there is a short film. It's only 20 minutes, but it is well worth your time. It is called Holding Moses, and it is made by Frankly Speaking Films. That is the union of Jen Rainan and Rivka Beth Meadow. They're terrific queer women filmmakers. All they want to do is make films that speak to our experience in our community. This movie, Holding Moses, is the story, true story, of a queer woman who has a child because she wants to more than anything in the world, and he is severely disabled because he has a rare chromosomological disorder. And it is about her coming to terms with his imperfections and, of course, her own. Highly recommended. If you go to the New Yorker website, it is streaming there for free.
Yeah,
we'll link to it in our email again.
Yes,
free. I watched it. It's quite compelling, and as Marin says, short. The Academy issues lists that they call the short lists before, which are about twice as many as they're going to end up nominating. So they may nominate 5, but they'll put out a short list of 10 that are on their sort of semi-finalist category. And this is there on their short list, Holding Moses. So Andy, you will be adding the link to that to our show note this week.
And last chance to make a donation and help me get home. No, no.
Yeah, no.
Thanks for all your support, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you to those who are monthly donors who don't often get acknowledged enough. We have quite a few of those, and you can do that too for smaller or bigger amounts. And we are also going to link to some of the despicable George Santos material from this week in our show notes. So go to gayusatv.org. You can find the place to donate there. You can find the links to the Holding Moses film and to George Santos material. I want to say cheerio, Andy, but that would be silly.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to all of you. And Marin and I will be back next week while Andy is at the theater. Bye.